Hi, y'all. This is Kristen Chenoweth.
Hi, I'm Gloria Stefan.
This is Sarah Bareilles.
Hi, I'm Patty Lapone.
This is Lin-Manuel Miranda. You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Hey, I'm John Tartaglia, and I'm Global Fraggle, and welcome to the Theater Podcast with Alan Seals.
Welcome to an all-new episode of the Theater Podcast. I'm Alan Seals. Our guest for this episode is John Tartaglia, who has a very cool origin story, and his entire career essentially started at the age of 16 when he was hired part-time to be a puppeteer on Sesame Street. This all came out of a long and fortuitous story of him becoming obsessed with puppetry at a young age, writing to Jim Henson, having Jim read John's letter, and actually never forgetting him. And all of this gets wrapped up in this amazing set of circumstances that leads through his Tony-nominated performance in the original cast of Avenue Q, and then finds its way all the way back to Fraggle Rock, the reboot, the show that John was actually obsessed with as a kid that got him into puppetry in the first place. Oh man, this was just meant to be. So tune in, sit down, have fun, grab your favorite puppet, and listen to this episode. Find me online, leave rating and a review, do all the things on the socials. And now everybody please enjoy this episode with John Tartaglia.
Here you go. 1, 2, 3.
Today's guest has a resume so long that if I went through all of it right now, this podcast would be about 3 hours of me talking. But shamelessly borrowed from his bio on his own website for the most part, our guest is an Emmy and Tony Award nominated actor who began his professional career at age 16 as a puppeteer for Sesame Street. His Broadway debut in Avenue Q earned him a Tony nom for originating the dual roles of Princeton and Rod, and other Broadway credits include Lumiere in Beauty and the Beast and originating Pinocchio and the Magic Mirror in Shrek on Broadway. He has received 8 Emmy Award nominations for Johnny and the Sprites on Disney Junior, a show that he created, executive produced, and just happened to star in. He's also an executive producer, director, writer, and radio personality. He most recently wrapped filming season 2 of Fraggle Rock, the reboot, which just speaks to my heart and my soul. And this time he is now also the creative supervisor for the whole damn series. John Tartaglia, welcome to the Theater Podcast.
I'm exhausted now. I'm exhausted hearing that. I don't know. I should be 100 years old from that. So
well, you started professionally at 16. So let's
I did.
Go there and back up. So to be hired on Sesame Street professionally, meaning it's your job and you're paid for it.
Yes.
Obviously that wasn't the first time you picked up a puppet. So where did the love for performing, acting, and especially puppetry, where did that even start?
Well, performing and acting, I started literally as young as I can remember. I mean, my parents are both in show business, so I grew up in a theatrical family. I mean, the earliest memories I have of spending time with my family truly are either being like in an audience watching my mom in a show and my dad in his director, or backstage watching, the same thing happen. And I actually credit that to my love for theater as a whole and falling into where I am now on the production side of things, because I think I was always as fascinated with like what was happening on stage as I was backstage. So it kind of makes sense, the craft part of my life, like why I got that kind of imbued in me at such a young age. But puppetry literally started when I was 7 and I discovered the original Fraggle Rock series. I remember watching it for the very first time and just being so entranced by it, because it is very theatrical in its own way. And I remember seeing it and literally saying, that's what I want to do. It was this like really instinctual, like visceral moment of like, bam, that's it. Like I can't describe it, but I think it's that feeling we all get when we're sitting in the theater watching a musical and going, oh, I want to do that. It's whatever that bug is. That's as early as I remember getting it, was from the original Fraggle Rock, which is now very ironic that here I am doing Fraggle Rock many years later.
Okay, so watching Fraggle Rock as a 7-year-old, was it the acting, or was it like literally, did you have the wherewithal at that age to realize those are real people creating this story with puppets? I mean, was there a disconnect, or was it all sort of the same thing?
I think it was this combination of, getting lost in the world of it. I mean, if you think about it, it's, it came out in 1983 when I discovered it. It was probably 1985 or 6, I guess. And, there weren't a lot of like world-based, like world-building shows for kids, fantasy lore show for kids, like that had these this, multi-level world that was created, and I think that pulled me in originally, and then it was just the humor and the music and the movement and the effects and everything about it. That's why I say it was so theatrical. It was like it combined everything that I think theater folks love. And then there was that day when it suddenly occurred to me. I was like, wait a minute, like, someone's doing that character, someone's voicing that character, they're moving somehow. And that's kind of how puppetry became, part of my life. Is I was like, how are they doing that? I want to do that. That's really, really cool. And then I just became obsessive after that, at 7 and 8, 9, 10 years old, of absorbing every single Muppet, Henson, Jim Henson puppetry thing I could find, way before the days of YouTube, way before the days of the internet. It was just whatever I could find at the local Blockbuster, or happened to come upon, on television, or in a library.
So then you're growing up as a teenager, or a young teenager, I guess, still doing puppetry, or at what point like that had to make you so popular?
That was really cool. Yeah, I was very popular in high school. super great experience in middle and high school. Yeah. No, I mean, it was weird. It was like, and it's funny because now I can look back and see it and be like, oh, I can see why, kids were like, what's happening? Because, to them, it was like, oh, you're playing with dolls. And I'm like, no, I'm puppeteer. Like, I would like try to get into the mechanics of puppetry and what it is. And you could see they were just like, yeah, okay. But no, it was just, it was like this world that I saw in the distance. And I was like, there's this amazing group of performers, the Muppeteers, the Jim Henson's puppeteers, that I'm going to be part of. And I had this very certain feeling that I was going to be part of it. And it was almost like, I guess, I always tell people, I think I kind of did the Oprah Winfrey manifestation thing before that was, what's it called? The Secret, I think is what it was called. That thing where I think I was doing that kind of, obliviously as a child. I had no idea, but I was doing it. I just was like, oh, it's going to happen. This optimistic, like, oh, it's going to happen. I'm going to be 18, move to New York City, work for the Muppets. And then it happened. So I think that there's there is some power to that.
So did you grew up in the New York area?
I grew up, so I was born in New Jersey, and I lived there with my mom and my father. They divorced when I was about 6. And then my mom and I lived alone in New Jersey for a few years. And when I was 10, she remarried and we moved to Pennsylvania. Okay,
so 10, Pennsylvania, and is Sesame Street still filmed in Astoria Kaufman Studios today?
It is, yes.
It is, yeah.
Yes.
So Astoria, New York, and locally here in our backyard here in New York City. So Fraggle Rock 2, is that filmed locally?
Fraggle Rock is actually filmed, the original was filmed in Toronto, and we film our version, Fraggle Rock Back to the Rock, in Calgary, Canada.
Oh, I didn't realize it was Canadian.
Yes.
So
it's such a... Yeah,
do
it's
you
a
get
part
to
of its DNA.
Commute?
You know what? I'm so lucky because I'm one of the few United States based people who gets to fly up and film the show. So we go up for about 6 months when we film it. And so Calgary literally feels like a second home because it's we'll spend about 6 months, 7 months there when we shoot a season.
But 6 months, that's a lot to shoot a season of a show.
It is. It is.
Is that, I guess, okay, so, well, I'm trying to decide if I want to go into okay, screw it. Let's dive into Fraggle Rock, because I've got other side stuff I want to get back to. Okay, but
we
Fraggle
can talk
Rock.
About anything. Okay. Jump around.
Fraggle Rock, again, one of those things where when I was a kid too, I loved all the songs, and I loved the way that everyone was just so optimistic and happy, and then you were always, the people in full body costumes were the bad guys.
The Gorgs. Yeah.
Right. And it also seemed so black and white to me as a kid. It just was like, you want to be a Fraggle, you want to be good. And I love now the Broadway kind of crossover too, along with like yourself, and then Lily Cooper is Doc, which is amazing. And then I even saw
she's incredible.
And then I even saw that Douglas Lyons is like a script editor, a story editor.
He's one of our writers, yep. And then you have Amy Garcia, who of course was in Into the Woods, the national tour recently, and she did Les Mis on Broadway, and it was an Avenue Q with me, and plays Ma Gorg. She's She's incredible. And Ben Durocher, who played Princeton and Avenue Q off Broadway, that I actually directed him in. He's one of our amazing puppeteers. And and our guest stars, right? Daveed Diggs and Ariana DeBose. And there's a lot of Adam Lambert. There's a lot of Broadway crossover.
Do you do that? Are you responsible for that outreach as creative director, or like, because a Canadian company, with so much of a Broadway crossover seems unusual, but maybe not.
You know, I really believe this. The greatest gift in being able to produce something or create something or run something is you get to bring people you love together, and you get to work with people you love. And there's so many people like Amy, like Ben, who, you know, over the years we've done different projects together and been in the trenches together. And it's like when you finally get the opportunity to say, okay, what's your dream cast of people that you know will bring their A game and will give everything they got? You know, you get that opportunity to bring those people in. And so, yeah, it was when we were putting this cast together, you know, for Fraggle Rock, what made the original series so beloved and so successful was they truly had the best time making the show, and that comes through on screen. And I think it's like anything, right? You know, when you go to see a musical and the cast is not getting along and things have not been happy, I really think you can feel it.
Yeah.
And so it was so important to put together a group of people for this production of Fraggle Rock that really would be a family and would have a great time, and everyone would collaborate. And so that's a part of it. And I really think theatrical people do that better than anybody else. You know, there's some folks, you know, in the film and television world who don't have that theatrical experience and don't understand that level of collaboration, that you can't get it anywhere else but the theater. So I think I like having theater people with me in a television experience.
I enjoy that, and I think maybe the theatrical people too could do a better job. Not better. That came out wrong. A more authentic job of talking to a seemingly inanimate object, right?
Yeah, to some degree. I mean, Lily is incredible because, you know, I had seen her in Spring Awakening. I knew of her for many years. We'd never worked together. And when she had auditioned for Doc, it was the height of COVID, right? The height of COVID. So we weren't auditioning in person. People were like still stuck in their bedrooms, you know, making tapes and making things. And so we didn't even meet. You know, normally when you'd audition someone for something like this, you would get in a room with Sprocket, the puppet, you know, the dog, and whoever's auditioning for Doc, and see the interplay and see how they grab the dog and play with the dog and see all that. And we couldn't do that. So literally it was all off of a tape. It was all kind of, you know, taking a guess on who would be best. And first day, it was like she and Sprocket went way back for years. And she's so warm, and she's so, you know, she loves what she does and loves the characters and loves the Fraggle so much that it just, again, it comes through. You can't fake that.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you said you have to go up there for 6 months, which is that because of your role and because I'm sure you're probably in every scene because you are a puppeteer puppeteering Sprocket and Gobo and all these other some of the dozers and all these other I mean, I guess is it because you're doing script and creative and filming all of this stuff that you have to be there the entire time? Because I assume Lily being based out of New York and having a family and a young child and whatnot, like she's not there for the whole 6 months.
No. Yeah. I mean, basically I wear so many hats on the show. So I'm now, since the second season wrapped, I've become the creative supervisor for the brand of Fraggle Rock. So that means like everything from the TV show to the albums to the merchandise to everything. But when we're in production, I'm really overseeing it with my other executive producers, but I'm the puppet captain, which means that I'm in charge of all the puppeteers. And I play all those characters, and I'm kind of like the creative mama of the show. That's a horrible way to put it, but you know what I mean. So I usually get there about 2 to 3 weeks before production starts. I'm usually there about 2 to 3 weeks after production ends. But the reason it's 6 months is because, you know, and I give credit to Apple TV Plus for this, when we first talked about bringing Fraggle Rock back. If you look at the original Fraggle Rock for 1983 to 87, and you look at, you know, the capabilities of television back then and everything, it was produced on the highest production level possible. And that's from everything from like the visuals, to the music, to the set design, to the performance, to everything. 18 puppeteers on set. It was a big show, and it was something that we would talk about it for years, and people would say, "Oh, you could never do Fraggle Rock again like that. It's too expensive. It'll never happen." And to Apple TV Plus's credit, when they wanted to do it, they said, "Yes, make Fraggle Rock, the same level as it was originally made, but just make it even better." So it takes us. We're on 3 giant sound stages. So we film at the Calgary Film Center. I think it might have changed names since we left, but it's a massive soundstage. It's where they shot The Last of Us and many other shows. And we have 3 giant sound stages. We use all 3 of them, and we have 25 puppeteers, and it takes about 6 to 7 days per half-hour episode to film. And it's because we just want it to be the best it can be. And it's shot single camera style, so that also takes a little bit longer. We were like, no, we have to make this as cinematic and epic as possible, because it has to be a Fraggle Rock for 2024. It has to be a Fraggle Rock for what kids are watching today. And kids are more sophisticated than they were in 1983 as far as what they expect from television, So, yeah, so it takes a while to shoot it, but it's like, I don't know, I can't describe it. It's like this amazing machine that everyone is pumping all together at the same time, and somehow we all know how to make it work, and it just comes together.
How does the preparation as a puppeteer? I've never done puppeteering really at all, and what got me interested in saying I thought that would be pretty cool was Avenue Q, to say. Yes. It's a show for adults with puppets, right, which makes it very relatable for the ticket buying audience of the Broadway ecosystem. But I assume, I guess I don't assume, I don't know. How, as a puppeteer, you're rehearsing your all of the movement of one hand or another or both, depending on what kind of puppets you've got, and then depending on if it's like a Trekkie monster where you've got 2 people that you have to act as one, you've got to rehearse that, and then on top of that you've got the lines and the intention and the actual acting part of it. So I think, and I've watched some behind the scenes stuff, the puppeteers are looking sort of down or forward, like they've got their hands above them, and they're looking at monitors, right? So they can see what they're doing. That's right. So then you have to come in with your lines, you have to know them cold, right? Like that's got to be before you ever step foot in there.
Well, it's funny because everyone's got a different process, but the majority of puppeteers, and this goes back to the Muppet Show days with Jim Henson and Frank Oz, because in television, scripts get updated and changed so often, especially on a serialized show like this, where each episode leads to the next. So you're adapting stories as you go. If you're shooting out of order, you might have had to change something in episode 12, but now you're shooting episode 9, so you have to flip back. So things get changed literally on the day and rewritten on the day. So we actually usually tape up our scripts next to our television monitors. And so what our eyes are doing, which is part of what you learn when you're learning puppetry, is it's not just, the art of performing on camera, which is already its own difficult thing because the screen is flipped and it's backwards and your arm is in the air, but you're looking down at a TV monitor, like you said. But you're also learning how to read your lines and go back and forth between the script and the shot and trust what's happening with your hand while you're reading your line. So it's a little bit of a what's the word? Like you're juggling 20 balls at once, and you just have to kind of, like a really good juggler, trust that they're going to land where they're supposed to. It's kind of the same thing. So yeah, we're and oftentimes like a sitcom, because our amazing writers come from the primetime sitcom world, they'll actually, we'll do a take and then they'll come in and be like, what if we change it to this and move this line here? Or let's, they'll plus it, in between takes. So you kind of have to have your script up, because sometimes the scene will just change and change. And I actually love that, because to me, it's like, that's how you get the best takes and you get the best work.
Hang on, everybody. We're just going to take a quick break. All right, now we're back. There's 2 things I want to go back to. One is, how did you get the Sesame Street job not being legal at 18? You were 16 when you got this. So that's one part of this. But then the other is making your Broadway debut in Avenue Q. I want to ask about how much acting you were doing before Avenue Q, and then how different it was to be seen on stage with your puppet, if that was unnerving or weird. So you choose your own adventure. Which one do you answer? What do you want to answer first?
Well, I guess to get to Sesame Street, no lyric pun intended. No. Once I decided at 8 years old, I was like, I was very, very steadfast and sure that like I was going to, this is my goal. My goal was like move to New York City at 18, become a puppeteer because I had read that other people had done that. So I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And, this is the days again before the internet, before texting, before Instagram, before everything, where if you wanted to get in contact with somebody, you had to either pick up a phone or write a letter. And I wrote a very, very earnest letter to Jim Henson at 8 years old, basically saying exactly that. I was going to move to New York City at 18 and work for him. And my dream was to be a puppeteer. And I might have sent some photos that my mom took of me, sent it off. And about a year later, got back this beautiful signed autograph photo from him and a really nice letter from like his secretary, basically saying that Jim would see my letter. And that, of course, thrilled me. And then a few months after that, I was at school and I get called into the office, and I think I'm in trouble. And they're like, and this is the days of like the new Mickey Mouse Club was coming back. If you remember, like the Britney Spears, Justin Timberlake, like it was the beginning of that. It was
I always
before they
wanted
were
to be
on
on
it, but
that.
It was
Yeah.
me too.
Oh,
And they used to
God.
have this thing. Yeah, it was the coolest show ever, right? And I
Right.
watched it obsessively. And they had this thing on the show called Guest Day, where they would basically, like, I think it was Fridays, they would have like a famous celebrity on, and then they would have a real kid interview that person. And get called to my principal's office, and there's a woman on the phone, and she says, my name is Kate Link, and I'm calling from, the Mickey Mouse Club, and Jim Henson's going to be a guest on Guest Day, and we're looking for kids to interview him, and he suggested you might be someone to talk to.
Wow.
And I just remember, like I could still remember like where I was standing and like the feeling of like my stomach dropping out, right? So it was like, I had to write a letter and write like 20 questions I would ask him, and a bio, which is hilarious when you're like 8 or 9 years old and ask for a bio. It's like, what? Like, I like dogs and candy, and
I get
so
grumpy when I don't eat lunch.
Exactly. Macaroni and cheese is my favorite. So my mom, God love her, sent it off overnight, and it started with like 30 something kids, got narrowed down, finally got down to me and one other kid. And if I'd won, I would have flown to LA and spent a day on the set with Jim Henson. It would have been literally my dream come true. Met all the puppeteers and everything. And of course they picked the kid who lived a little bit closer to LA, and for whatever reason, who, by the way, I've met since, and we are friends now. And it's been so wonderful to connect with him and be like, you had the experience that I wanted when I was a kid. And he's like, well, you have the career that I wanted.
I was going to say, is he like an attorney now? He just doesn't do anything.
He works in animation. He's an incredibly talented artist and has a family, and the sweetest man in the world. He's come to a couple things I've gotten to do. But I remember meeting him. He came to one of my one-man shows, I think in New York City, and I was like, you're the guy, you're him. Anyway, so that didn't happen. Obviously, I didn't get to meet him then. And then I want to say probably 6 months later, he passed away. And I was devastated. I was so devastated when Jim died. It was the first, besides a family member, it was the first time I knew what death really was, like, in that. And to me, Jim had become, my parents were divorced. I think looking back now in a very, heady way, I think he'd become like a father figure to me. And so, to lose a second father figure essentially was just horrible. And there was all this uncertainty. What's going to happen to the Muppets, and Jim's gone. It was just this whole thing. So I felt like my dream was dashed. And then if you fast forward a few years later, I wrote to Kevin Clash, who was the original performer of Elmo on Sesame Street, and Dinosaurs. You remember the show Dinosaurs came out. He was
Not
Baby
the
Dinosaur.
mama.
Not the mama. He was Baby Dinosaur. And I was obsessed with that show. Obsessed. And then I wrote him a very similar kind of letter. At this point, I'm like probably 12 or 13. And I just said, I want to work for the Muppets, and I love dinosaurs. I didn't know that since Jim had passed away, Kevin had kind of taken on a lot of the casting for the company. I didn't know that. But again, I think when you reach out, you write a letter and you're earnest, sometimes that leads to something. And he called my parents. I probably wrote my phone number in the letter because I was very determined as a kid. And he called and he basically said to my mom, if your son wants to be a puppeteer, like, he should come and watch us film. And so I got invited to come see the set of Sesame Street. At this point, I'm about 13 or 14. And it was a dream come true. And it was like,
wow.
I got to meet everybody. I got to try on all the original puppets. And we're having lunch. And I'll never forget this. We're having lunch. And I very kind of, in a very ballsy way, said to Kevin, well, why did you call? Because at the time, Dinosaurs was huge. Elmo was becoming huge. Like, they were all very, very busy people. And he said, oh, Jim used to talk about you. Whoa. And I just was like, wait, what? And And he said, yeah, Jim used to talk about you. And he's like, he was always looking for like new up and coming performers because he recognized that this original generation of puppeteers was getting older. We needed to look to the younger group. And and so in some very, very indirect, but I have to think magical, ethereal way, I always say I have my career because of Jim, even though I never met him, because not only did he inspire me, but because of maybe he just once, and I know my last name is like, not the most common last name. So for whatever reason, my name stuck out. And so when I happened to write another letter, it happened to kind of be a connection point, and that started me off. And so I started going up for like workshops to New York City, which were these like, I always joke now because I'm on this side of things, but they're basically lies. They call them workshops, but they're basically brutal auditions where they would bring in like 50 puppeteers, people who wanted to be puppeteers. And it would start with like 50 people, and over like a 3-day process, you would get cut. Right. So it's basically like a chorus line, like everyone's there standing on the line, ready to go. And then it's like, nope, not you, not you.
I'm just picturing a chorus line with like Rod and
with puppets on our hands.
Puppets hanging out. Yeah.
It's not far from that, honestly.
Yeah.
And then, and somehow I would always make it. I would always last. And I think it's because of my musical theater background as a kid, and I was really good at movement. And so much of puppetry is about movement and choreography and coordination. So I worked my first legitimate day at 16 because I was old enough to be hired at that point on a part-time basis. And I would just do, background characters, and I would assist characters and things like that. And I remember walking onto the set of Sesame Street at 16 and being like, oh my God, this is my work. Like, I work here now. So that's how I got to Sesame Street. And then to kind of go into what you were saying before about Avenue Q, I moved to New York at 18, did exactly what I dreamt of. I was going to go to college, and then I got the call at 18 to come to New York City and work full time for Sesame Street. So my parents were amazing, and they were like, okay, if you're going to do this, if you're going to skip college, if you're going to be an adult and go work a very adult career, you're going to live like an adult. And they helped me find an apartment, but then they were like, good luck. And I'm so thankful they did that, because I, at 18, had to learn how to pay rent, how to pay for, electricity and cable and all those things. And I moved to New York City by myself at 18, lived in an apartment on the Upper East Side. I don't know how I'm not dead in the gutter, because, that was a very scary, risky thing. I literally grew up on Sesame Street. My formative years were on Sesame Street. And I was, in high school, I was doing a lot of musical theater. I was the star of the shows in high school and stuff like that. I was that kid. I was that, the theater kid who loved it. And when I got to New York, I really missed doing that. So I started auditioning professionally. And so I had this dual dream, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. I had the dream of like working for the Muppets in Sesame Street, which I was doing. But then I had this other part of me that was like, I love Broadway and theater. That my dream is to be on Broadway too. But I just wanted to be like man number 7 in the background. I would have been fine with that. You know what I mean? Like, or like, I don't even know what, like hyena number 8 in The Lion King. Like, that would have been fine, But I was out auditioning, and I did a lot of off Broadway, and I did the Theater Works tour, and I did a lot of treading the boards, pounding the pavement kind of stuff, auditioning for Broadway shows, hilarious things there. And then someone at Sesame Street knew that I was doing theater, and Jeff Marks, who was one of the co-composers and co-creators of Avenue Q, was an intern at Sesame Street. And so he kind of knew who I was. He tells the story, he got fired because he wasn't a very good intern for the music department. And when they were putting together Avenue Q, which was going to be a TV show, actually, it was going to be like a Comedy Central-esque, like adult Sesame Street, long before Crank Yankers.
No kidding.
They thought of me.
Yeah,
they thought of me, and they said, we need some like young, leading man type for this character Princeton, and he'll also play Rod. But they wanted it to be an actual legit Sesame Street puppeteer, because it was about the puppetry at that point. And we did a reading, and it was like 5 songs and 4 sketches. And that night, our Broadway producers were in the house watching this reading, and our future Broadway producers, and they were the ones who were like, this needs to be a piece of theater. And that's what started it. And so basically I accidentally fell into the creation of Avenue Q.
Wow.
And we did readings and workshops, and my joke was always, as we were going, I was always, I was savvy enough to know that, like, usually on Broadway, like a leading role is usually held given to, you know, a celebrity or star or someone who's least well known. I was this nobody in theater at that point. So I was always joking, like, I'm waiting for the days when, like, you know, they're like, surprise, like, we're replacing you with Neil Patrick Harris, or we're replacing you with Joey Fatone or whoever, you know. And no, but then we kept going and going, and then, you know, history is what it is. But we went off Broadway and then Broadway, and it just, my life changed. So it was just another moment of, I really am a person who believes everything happens for a reason. I have to believe that because of my life and my trajectory and the way things have happened. And I think it's a case of like never being afraid of hearing no, and also just writing letters and putting yourself out there and just being as, you know, as certain in your dreams as possible.
That's insane that you just took chances and followed every lead that was presented to you. And then
Yeah. I always say to people, like, you know, it's so easy when you're in this business, whether you're a director or an actor or whatever you are, that it's so easy to get so myopically focused on one thing or just that one thing that you might miss out on other paths that get you there, but like take you on these other amazing, you know, journeys to get there. And I look back at like, you know, when someone would say, do you want to take a dance class? I'm not a dancer. I can move well, but I'm not a dancer. But I'd say, sure. And I'd take that dance class. And then I can always look back and go, I'm so glad I took that dance class, because if I hadn't taken that dance class, I wouldn't have known this. And that has paid off here. Like, you know, like someone invited me to like an arts and crafts meetup one time, and I was like, okay, like, sure. And I went to that with not a huge interest and walked away with all these skills of how I could make things myself, to make my own puppets. Like, I think it's amazing when you open yourself up to the universe and to the ability to kind of pull from different places. That tends to help you, I think, as an artist along the way.
Hang on, everybody. We're just going to take a quick break. All right, now we're back. Okay, going into Avenue Q, the other question of the Choose Your Own Adventure earlier, was it weird to be on stage and be seen? Like, because you're walking around with characters who are ignoring you, the person, the John.
Yes, and I give such credit to Jason Moore, our director at Avenue Q, because he, you know, when we would perform the show in readings and workshops and things like that, you know, you could see the puppeteers because that was, you know, just we didn't have scenery because you were doing a reading, you're doing a workshop. And it was really Jason and our original producers who were like, no, part of the magic of this show is seeing the puppeteers, how they do it. Because everyone knows puppets like Miss Piggy and Kermit and things like that. When people don't know, they're still, even Fraggle Rock to this day, when people come to the set, they're like, that's how you do it? They're so intrigued by how we do what we do and the way we work together with, you know, someone's assisting a hand or someone's doing eyes or whatever. So that became part of the magic, and they really built that into the show. And to answer your question, no, I mean, I kind of had this weird, I get visuals of things. I always see things visually. I'm a very visual thinker. And I would kind of like close my eyes when I was like 18, 19 years old, living in New York City in my apartment by myself, singing along to like the original, you know, cast recording of Rent and dreaming of being Mark in Rent. I would like stand there and I would close my eyes and I would feel like, you know, what the spotlight on you must feel like, and what it's, you know, standing in front of a Broadway audience must feel like. And I would like visualize it. And I always tell people, and this is the truth, that I remember walking out for the first preview of Avenue Q on Broadway, you know, and in my role, Princeton, I was the first actor physically on stage, and I would walk out in the dark during applause and the lights would come up and I'd sing BA in English. And I remember the feeling was exactly the same as what I had imagined, like down to like the feeling of the spotlight, everything. The one thing I had not ever pictured was that my arm would be up in the air and I'd have a puppet on it. But I feel like that's the magic of like, it took these two things that I loved both equally and passionately and combined them. And that's the kind of thing where like, you have to believe that there's, no pun intended, a purpose behind everything, because I don't know how else you couldn't have written that. Do you know what I mean? You could not have written out like a more perfect situation for what I do. But no, I never thought in my wildest dreams, and that it would be the, you know, a lead role. Again, I thought I was going to be like background guy 7 who moves the desk. I would have been thrilled about that. I just wanted to be on stage, you know?
Wow. And so rounding out the rest of the cast, were they looking for people also that had puppetry experience? Or did you find character actors that could then learn the puppetry, or
No, in fact, that was a big. It had to be puppeteers, and I think there was such a recognition of what we did was so complicated, and just like that what made you care about those characters. When Stephanie would sing "Fine Fine Line" with Kate on her hand, so many people would say after the show, I had this moment watching that where I was sitting there getting, teary-eyed, and some people crying because I'd gone through a breakup or whatever. And then I would realize, like 45 seconds into it, that's a puppet.
Yeah.
Like but it's a testament to the talent of someone like a Stephanie or Rick with Trekkie or Jen with Mrs. T or the Bad Idea Bears or everybody that we helped you believe it was real. And so when it became like, oh, this show's going to run, it's going to have a hit on Broadway, it's going to have a run on Broadway. It was like, crap, we need to now find more people. And there's not a lot of puppeteers who do musical theater. Now there are, but there really weren't back in 2003. And a lot of puppeteers get into puppetry to hide. They don't want to be seen as themselves. And Avenue Q is incredibly exposing. So it was hard. And so that's when they realized they had to start training people in the art of puppetry, which, of course was a little bit like, clutch our pearls, because that's, the opposite of what we did. But now what the beauty of that is that all of these musical theater people over the years doing the Broadway, off-Broadway, and tour and regional productions of Avenue Q now have this skill of puppetry, which is becoming so much more a part of the theatrical world. So it's cool that we got to kind of be a small part of that. But I remember Barrett Foe is a good friend of mine, and he was my original one of my understudies, and we still joke about the fact that it was like, when Barrett came in, everyone was kind of like, side-eye musical theater guy, you're not a puppeteer, like, and it's so funny to laugh about that. But yeah,
well, some people kind of fall into it, and I enjoyed it. Okay, so I did The Secrets of Castle O'Sullivan at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Did you
Oh my
ever
God, I love it.
Did you ever see that?
I did not, but I used to go to Busch Gardens Williamsburg.
So Busch Gardens.
Yeah.
So the show no longer exists, but I don't know how long it was around for. For 3 years off and on, I was we rotated between the lead and the puppeteer because the leprechaun there was a stage left and a stage right
not
leprechaun.
knowing what the show is, I love that you just like said it as if it was like so normal to be like, and the leprechaun.
Right. There was a stage left leprechaun, a stage right version, because they're bolted in the set.
Okay.
And then a little tiny fairy world when the big reveal happens at the end and the walls open up and we're sending the leprechaun. I'm so
going to YouTube this after this.
I can send you my recording of it. I have a recording of it. I will. And it was a little trigger, like the mouth, yep, for the tiny Clancy, I assume is how the Doozers work.
Very similar, yeah.
Similar, because the rumor was that the set was built by Jim Henson shop. I think it was.
Oh, maybe.
So we had big servos. I want to nerd out about the tech for a little bit. There's two reasons I'm bringing this up. Number one, I have puppetry experience. Are you hiring? Number two, I want to nerd out about the tech because I love. We would have problems with, and we'd have to have Clancy, was the name of the leprechaun, come in and get serviced all the time because his eyes would stop moving or his mouth, the latex in the corner of his mouth would start to tear a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. But what got me really into puppetry when I was a little kid was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles live action movie.
Oh, of course. Yes. The classics.
Because seeing the all the servos and all the tech that went into the head.
Yeah. And that was so groundbreaking at that time.
Right.
So groundbreaking. And so, really it's funny, that actually, just to say real quickly, that actually started that technology that you're talking about. And it's very, look, my dog just yelled, in a very,
I thought that wasn't a child.
Out. In a very, beginning way was started first with Dark Crystal and then Fraggle Rock. And so it kind of advanced, Fraggle Rock did a lot for it because the Gorgs were a very similar technology. And then that kind of just got, more compact and more detailed and got put into the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember I was reading that all the control units were in the shell, so they had wires running down the head into the shell. But then for the second one, for Secret of the Ooze, it had advanced, so I think they were able to control everything inside the head and make the suit a lot lighter or something. I don't know. I always wanted to design this kind of stuff. So when you are designing and when you're creating your own puppets and whatnot, Are you using all of this? And is it still, for the stuff that is animatronic based, is it still completely like people off to the side with the controls and everything, or
It's very similar. Yeah. I
Yeah?
mean, what's changed is that things are smaller than they used to be, right? So now there's, little servo motors that are like a half inch large, which is crazy. And it's also just the quality has changed, and then everything is digital now as opposed to analog, right? So you get all those different changes, and like, the Gorgs, for example, like in the original series, they had basically two functions. They could blink their eyes and they could make their mouth flap, and that was
Yeah.
kind of it. Which again, for 1983, that was huge.
Right.
And then when we brought them back, we're like, well, let's make them even more expressive. And so now with the technology that you have and the way that things are smaller and more compact, we could get more motors in the head, or you could get more quality, servos and better movement. So now they can, curl their lips, and eyes can go back and forth, and Junior can kind of, have a little more of a smile. And so it's kind of just adapting that technology for what we do now, but still keeping the same fundamentals, the same principles. But when you go to, that's my favorite thing, honestly, is when we're in pre-production, when you go to the creature shop and they're building everything, and you're just seeing the inner workings of how it works, how it comes together. These brilliant, I'm great at like, showbiz, sequins, feathers, doing a show. They're like the masters of like designs and logistics and engineering and motors and all the stuff that you're just like, how did you guys figure this out? I have such an appreciation for that.
That was always something that I thought I would really enjoy as a career of like the engineering, the design, turning a character design into a functioning head.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I always thought I would enjoy that so much, but in different life, different multiverse, that's what I'm doing. But now coming back to Fraggle Rock and everything else you're doing, I mean, like I just touched on like Johnny and the Sprites for Disney Junior, and you've got, let's see, also stars Kip, Wallaby, and Jim Henson's Word Party, and Hank and Julie's Green Room starring Julie Andrews. I mean, you've got all this stuff you are involved with. You're creating your own, you're designing your own. How, at what point, I guess when you're creating
sleep?
this. No, I want to nerd. I'm still nerding out on
'Cause I
tech.
don't.
I still want to nerd out on tech because there's still the basic, like sort of Sesame Street, Fraggle Rock, hand up a puppet. You're making the mouth move with your hand. There's no mechanics. There's no animatronics in it. But at what point when you're creating in your world do you start to determine this needs to have that feature? Those eyes need to move on their own. Like the Doozers need to be 4 inches tall compared to Fraggles that are 10 inches. Like how do you start creating this world, and how does that translate to the technology? Because I'm a nerd.
I love you're a nerd because I'm a nerd too. I think usually it's what's the creative landscape of the show, what needs to happen, and then you kind of work from there, right? So like, for example, like with Fraggle Rock, you're like, okay, we know that you have these three very different creatures, right? One, look at the Fraggles, like you said, are kind of your typical hand puppet kind of puppet, right? But then you also need the Doozers to exist, as these little small creatures that, are knee high to a Fraggle. They're about 6 inches or so. And they need to, ride construction vehicles. They need to be hanging off the side of buildings. They need to, be able to ride by and sing a song as they're in the back of a pickup truck. And then you also have these giant lumbering creatures called the Gorgs, and you're going to oftentimes see the Fraggles with the Gorgs. So you start to kind of work from there. And it's like, how do we accomplish this? Now, I can't say that if Fraggle Rock was a brand new series, right, that had no legacy, no expectations, no one knew what it was going to be, I don't know if you would do it all with practical puppetry. I think nowadays with CG being so incredibly, I don't want to say easy, but it is easier to put into a show than it used to be. You could do all the Doozers in CG. You could probably even do the Gorgs in CG or the Fraggles. But I think we felt like, no. There's a tangible, real feel to the show. It has to feel that way. We didn't want it to be all animated because it would have been too easy, and it would have felt not like the Fraggle Rock that we love.
Right.
So then you work backwards and you say, okay, so, we still want to do the Gorgs as full body costumes. And, we still want those faces to be expressive and to move and do everything. But now let's just make them a little bit better than they were before. Or like you look at the Doozers and you're like, well, we still want them to like be on the side of buildings. But like one thing that I'll tell you that's cool, something that didn't exist back in the 80s that we've been able to take advantage of is, little circuit boards, computer boards, right? Like that we have on our phones and things like that. They've changed everything because now they're this big. It used to be like a computer. You had to have like the giant old timey Apple, with the wires running. Now it's all, you could put I'm forgetting the name of it now, but a circuit board, I guess, or whatever you call it, into a computer chip, into something. So now we can build doozers that have their own little computer board attached to them that can do the same motion over and over again. You can basically program them. Think of like like an animatronic from Disney World that like does the same motion over and over again. Small World, there you go. We can like program a doozer. Exactly. We could program a doozer to do that same motion, and it could be a bunch of them, a bunch of different motions over and over again. Put that puppet hanging off of, a stalactite in the background, and let it run all day and never think about it and never have to have someone puppeteer it. That's something you couldn't have done in 1983.
Oh,
right?
wow.
So it's the same technology in the sense of it's still a little motor-driven puppet, but you're able to do it in a different way now than you were in the 80s. Or, even like the miniature Fraggles, if you look at the Gorg's Garden in the original, right, they'd have the Gorgs, and then to make the proper scale Fraggles, they'd either be shot in front of blue screen, which we still do, or they'd have these little kind of like rod puppet, Fraggles that are like the size of like a Starbucks cup, basically, on little triggers or little servos. And they never quite looked great. Like everyone who worked in the original series will tell you, they'll be like, we didn't love it, but it was what we could do. Now we're like, oh, well, that's when we can use our CG Fraggles when we need to. So if you look at the first season of Back to the Rock, the reboot, there's a great moment in the pilot where like Junior, the Fraggles run out and he sees them, and you see these Fraggles, miniature Fraggles, running around Junior's feet. Well, you couldn't have really done that on blue screen, so we did CG double Fraggles, and they work so well. And so it's like it's just always kind of saying, what is the creative call for it to decide how to do it. It's rare that you go, I really want to build an animatronic puppet. Let me justify now how to fit that into a show. It's rare that happens. It's usually like, how do you use the technology that's available to make this creative idea come to life the best way?
I dove into the behind the scenes of Team America when that movie came out, and I remember Trey Parker saying in one of the interviews, like, they had to remove a set of servos because it made them look too real, and so right, and so I was gonna bring up sort of the uncanny valley effect, right? Of when you're saying, let's make the Gorgs do more things, let's have more controls and more expressions, but at what point does it become too much where you're like, whoa, wait a second, I'm actually creeped out?
You know what? That's a great point. And actually, I think, that movie of Team America, which is so funny, they almost wanted the puppets to look like ridiculous puppets, right? Like they wanted you to see the string, because I think it helped add to the like irreverence of it and the craziness of it. Obviously, with Fraggles and stuff like that, we want you to believe it's as real as possible. But to your point, like, we had that discussion of, we were looking at one point in really adding a lot of facial enhancements to the Gorgs. Like, we were going to actually like kind of, because now the technology is there, that like on top of what the servos could do on set, the motors, we're like, well, what if we went in with CG afterwards and really made their cheeks rise when they're happy, and we had a scene where we were going to have the Gorgs, I forget what we were going to do. It was like tears overflowing, all the stuff. We were going to make it super realistic, and it just felt so wrong for the aesthetic of the show, because to your point, it would have been like these weird, it would have been so real, it would have been uncomfortable. And there's something glorious about, like, the Fraggles, right? Gobo is basically the equivalent. They're not ping pong balls, but they may as well be two white ping pong ball eyes, basically, with fur and feathers. And you believe he's real. He's the simplest Kermit the Frog, right? Simplest puppet on the earth. What makes him feel real is the way he's performed. You could add a ton of motors and make him blink. You could add little motors nowadays to make his little dimples go up and down, but it would just not feel right. And so, yeah, you can take it too far is I guess the long way of saying that. And I love the magic of, there's this great old story about Miss Piggy. Frank Oz used to get letters where people would say, oh my gosh, my favorite thing in the world is when Miss Piggy bats her eyes at Kermit. Well, here's the fun fact. Miss Piggy's eyes don't move. They're glued on. They don't move. They don't blink. They're not even eyelids that move. It's just the art of puppetry and Frank's brilliant performance of her that made people think, they filled in the blanks. Yeah. That made people think that she was batting her eyes at Kermit or blinking at Kermit. but it was just the illusion of his puppetry that made you think that. And I love that.
What is that term? I'm blanking on that term where so many, like there's a mass collective misremembering of how something happened.
Is it Stockholm? Not Stockholm syndrome. What is it?
Hey, this is Alan cutting in from the edit room. We're talking about the Mandela effect, which is a phenomenon where facts and events are collectively misremembered by thousands of people.
I totally know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like Neil Armstrong didn't actually say it's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. He said something else, but now everyone remembers it the wrong way because that's how it's
exactly
perpetuated.
Right.
But yeah, it's one of those things where the brain is uncanny in its ability to go from point A to point B. Like you said, it will fill in the blanks because it recognizes that if you have gone to point C, from point A, you must have traveled through point B, and to save conscious processing power, I'm just gonna extrapolate it and pretend it happened.
And you have to wonder, like when it comes to this, I feel like because puppetry is so primal, it's been around since caveman days, literally, and so you're kind of like, is that why? Like, is that why, first of all, we're still so intrigued by it? Like, I was just saying the other day that, I really feel this is true, that puppetry is like the last magic trick that no one can actually tell you exactly how it's done. Meaning that, we know how a stunt scene is done in a movie. We know how an explosion is done in a movie. We know how, Siegfried and Roy's tricks were done. And we know all that, we're so savvy now as a collective society when it comes to behind the scenes and technology. But you put a really good puppeteer with a puppet on their hand in front of somebody, even an adult, a jaded adult, and somehow they just go with it and believe it and will talk to that character. I would have Rod on my hand, from Avenue Q, and do interviews and things like that. And I would love nothing more than, dealing with a newscaster who is just kind of, grumpy or difficult, and just taking the piss out of them with that character, and seeing that the kid in them would come out eventually, and again, it's this guy holding this, inanimate object on his hand. It's just the way I would do it, and the believability of how I'd move the puppet, that people would completely forget I was there, and I could say things with that character that I could never say as myself. But I think that's the magic trick, and I can't even tell you why. You know what I mean? I'm doing it, and I have no idea. It's just it's this magical thing that happens, this connection that happens with people.
I wonder what the psychological reason is behind that. This is fascinating to me. Hang on, everybody. We're just going to take a quick break. All right, now we're back. You're right, because, something you had said about watching the performance of Fine Line. You're right. When I have to remind myself when I watch Avenue Q to that the puppeteer is still on stage, because you're looking at the puppet who is being treated like an actual real tangible thing, a character person, by all the other actors on stage. Mm-hmm. So I think that's part of why all of this works, is because it's this combination. It's not just a giant realm of puppets, and that's why I think, oh man, I just had an epiphany. Sesame Street, probably exact same reason, because you've got real life people showing the audience that they need to believe these puppets are real. It's not just a puppet show. It's a show with characters.
Well, that goes back to happen to be Doc puppets. And Sprocket. Yeah, that goes back to Lily Cooper as Doc. It takes someone who really believes and really is willing to let them, they're the bridge, right? So if she didn't believe that Sprocket was real and didn't react to Sprocket as if Sprocket was real dog, I don't know if the audience would feel as empathetic towards that character, right? And there's a famous story. I won't say who it is because I love this actress. I don't want to throw her under the bus, but there's a famous celebrity who's a beloved actress who was a guest on Sesame Street. And for all of the incredible acting skills she has, she could not get out of her head that there's a person below camera doing the puppets, and she could not believably act with the puppet. And it is the most awkward thing to watch when you watch it, because you just don't feel, you can feel it. It's like this weird, unspoken thing that it's like, oh, this isn't working. So it really, it's a testament to Anne Harada and Natalie Belcon and Jordan Gelber, our original performers in Avenue Q, human performers, that you really believed them. You really believed those characters because they believed so strongly, for sure.
Well, even on Sesame Street too, I love watching celebrities talk to Elmo, especially because Elmo is a character that has been around forever since their childhood, my childhood, everyone's childhood. Elmo's just always been there, and to get it's like a dream come true for these people to see themselves actually on camera and interacting with this character that to them in their previous iterations of youth, right? It was real. Elmo was real to them.
Yeah.
And and still is. And so they, as adults, they're coming back and immediately you can see it just like their eyes light up on camera. I love watching that.
One of my favorite memories, I'll never forget this, is Noah Wyle. I don't know if you remember him from ER. He was, the biggest star at the time.
Yeah.
Came on the show. And he was like, he and George Clooney, they were like the stars, right? He walked on set and literally, like, I can see it. He walked out onto the set. We're all there with the puppets and stuff like that, working on something else. And he literally just started crying, like uncontrollably. And then Carol Spinney, who was the original Big Bird, God rest him, he was one of my favorite people. He came over because we knew that Big Bird was his favorite, and started talking to him. And Noah was like this blubbering, beautiful mess where he was just like, he couldn't get over, he could barely had a scene with Big Bird. He could barely get through it because he was just like, I cannot believe this is happening. And it wasn't that, it was certainly an appreciation for the mechanics of how it was happening, but he was like, no, this is Big Bird. I am talking to Big Bird, and this is my friend. He's never not been my friend, and now we're meeting. And I just remember, like, that was, like, I even get teary-eyed thinking about it because it was the power of what this is, and the impact that, we think about this all the time with Fraggle Rock, that, like, we're not just making a TV show, we're making best friends for kids literally around the globe who, like in my case, as a divorced kid that needed an escape. I think that's why I became so obsessed with the show, is it was a place to escape to. And these were characters that were my friends. I didn't have a lot of friends as a kid. It was like that importance, like that's not just making a funny sitcom that adults watch, every Friday night. You're making something that is possibly saving lives. You're making something that is connecting with people in a way that may, like in my case, encourage them to go off and do something with their lives, and if at the very least you're making something that, because of the messages in the show, might help kids have a better outlook on life, or look at things in a way differently than they would have otherwise. And I think that is such a privilege and a responsibility. And if you think about it too much, you like have a nervous breakdown, but it's something on the hardest days on set when we were exhausted, we try to remind ourselves of that it's like, it's the greatest responsibility you can have. I think.
That's beautiful. And I think it's a wonderful place to start to transition and wrap up because you said it so beautifully. I've got a new segment. This is now the third time I'm doing it, and I hope it goes well. I need you to give me a number 1 through 8, and I'm going to tell you, I'm going to put 60 seconds on the clock, and you have to tell me the plot to that popular musical in 60 seconds or less. So 1 through 8.
Okay.
Which I have my musicals listed 1 through 8. Which one do you want to do?
Oh, Jesus. Like I can just pick a number? Pick a number?
And it'll correspond to a musical that I will tell you.
What if I don't know the musical? Okay. All right.
Then you better be a good storyteller.
I have 60 seconds.
Yep.
To tell you the plot of this musical. Okay.
Yep.
Number 4.
Okay. All right. 60 seconds on the clock. You have starting now. You have to tell me the plot to Hamilton. Go.
60 seconds remaining.
Hamilton. Based on a famous political figure, Alexander Hamilton. We follow his journey from how he started off as a young man, this is hilarious, all of the incredible forces in his life, including his
45
wife,
seconds remaining.
that influenced him and changed him. We go with him on a journey through both the highs and severe lows of his personal and political life, and then really realize at the end of the day that it is his wife's story.
30 seconds remaining.
She continues on the
30
legacy.
seconds.
There's that. Oh my God. I mean, what else is there to say? I mean, it features the most incredible direction and choreography, Tommy Kail and Annie Blankenbuehler staging, gorgeous set design. It changed the face of Broadway. Lin-Manuel Miranda. It was his passion project. People thought he was crazy when he first did that original song at the White House, but then of course it turned out to be this thing you couldn't even
5,
not get tickets for.
4,
I love it. I've seen it so many times,
2,
and it's brilliant.
All right. I love it. I love it.
Wait, but now I want to know. Wait, I have to ask you then, because I almost picked number 2. What's number 2? Will you tell me?
Frozen.
Oh, I'm about to direct that. I could have told you that easier. My goodness.
All right, so the three standard closing questions now that ask everyone to wrap up the episodes. The first one, just very simply, is what motivates you?
Oh, God. Jim Henson. You know, I look at the limited time that he was given and the amazing impact he made on this earth. I mean, it's incredible to think, you know, in a career less than 40 years of a career, he literally gave us more cultural touchstones than I would say next to Walt Disney. I think it was Jim and Walt Disney, and his passion for what he did, and I think that work ethic and that belief in making a difference with your art is something that even at my most exhausted, I try to think about and try to think about how I get to carry that on, and that's such an incredible gift.
Yeah, he had such an impact in the world. What advice would you give to your younger self and younger people listening now, starting out down a similar path?
Oof. Younger advice to myself. Oh gosh, to trust what your passion is and to not let others' opinions of the reality of it coming true influence you. The only times I feel like I ever fell off the path, or any times I ever felt like I lost myself, was when I let others' opinions on the ability for me to achieve my dreams come into play. And I think we have to believe so deeply in what we want to do for it to happen. And I would also say to not be such a people pleaser. I am a people pleaser. It's something I struggle with all the time, and that it's okay to sometimes say no and to sometimes, you know, take care of yourself first. That's very difficult for me. And for other people, I would say, similar to what I said earlier, like it's so vital that you believe passionately in your dream. And the reason why people might say no to the realities of your dream coming true is because it's not theirs and it's not their path. And so they don't see it the way you see it. And their journey and their abilities and their realities are different than yours. And you have to believe in those things for you. And I would say just to be as kind and as grateful and as collaborative as you can possibly be, because the people that you work with and I've learned this, when you're 18 or 19 years old, you will have the ability to work with many years later. And sometimes they're the reason why you get that next opportunity. And I really believe everyone deserves to be treated with kindness.
Well, you can still be a puppet pleaser. That's okay, but not do less people pleasing, more puppet pleasing.
I'm definitely a puppet pleaser. Yeah.
Okay, good. Last question then, hardest one. If you can only see one show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
Oh, come on. That's cruel.
It's the hardest question.
You know what? The first thing that just came to me, because it's my favorite musical, and I still think it's one of the most brilliantly constructed shows with the best score ever, is Little Shop of Horrors.
Oh, yeah.
I literally think it's like, you know what I mean? Those Howard Ashman lyrics and gorgeous Alan Menken melodies and that direction and the book. It's so good. I love that show so much.
Can you do you can bring in like an Audrey 2 nod in Fraggle Rock somewhere? Just put like a little carnivorous plant in the back.
You know, there's a character in season 2 that's from the original series called Lanford, and he's Moki's pet plant, and he has a very kind of like Venus flytrap element to him, and you know, they're definitely, who knows who came first in the original series, but they definitely complement each other. And he eats everything, not people, not meat, but he does eat like hats and scarves and things like that. So I love Lanford. So
Fair.
All
right,
there you go.
So how can we connect with you online on the social medias?
You could find me at Johnny Tartags on Instagram. You could find me under my name on Facebook, and I'm on Cameo. You can request a video from me on cameo.com/Johnny Tartags. I guess, yeah, I'm not on the TikTok. I should be on the TikTok, but I'm not on the TikTok. But someday I'll be on the TikTok.
Can you put Gobo
if we're allowed.
on TikTok?
Gobo's been on TikTok.
Really?
Gobo's been on more cool social media places than I have.
Fair.
As myself.
Fair. Very fair. Yeah, well, make sure that, let's see, beginning streaming on March 29th is the next season of Fraggle Rock on Apple TV.
Yes.
So, oh God, check it out. I've been watching it already. It's so much fun. I've been like texting all my friends
Thank you.
I'm feeling so nostalgic. I want to watch it some more.
Our second season is epic. I'm really proud of it. So
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So wonderful job. Congratulations on everything.
Thank you.
You can get more of me on Threads, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Leave a rating and a review where you're listening now. Thanks to Jukebox the Ghost for the intro and outro music. And Johnny Tartags, thanks for this convo. Tell Gobo and all the doozers I said hi, especially Sprocket as well.
Sure will, pal.
All right. It's good to see you and wonderful to have the talk.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.